Evergreen's virtual happy hour series where we talk about policy with interesting people over a pint of their favorite drink. Thank you all for being here. We're pleased you're taking the time on this Monday afternoon. My name is Sam Ricketts. I'm a co-founder and senior advisor here at Evergreen, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by two of Congress's top climate leaders for a discussion on the latest developments in getting climate investments passed in the Congress this year. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce our two panelists and ask them if they brought a drink and what's in their glass. And then I'll ask them a series of questions. And if we have time after that, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have a burning question that you'd like to ask Senator Tina Smith or Congressman Ro Khanna, please feel free to use the Q&A feature here on Zoom or drop it into the chat, or you can tweet it at us at Evergreen Action. So without further ado, let's dive in and introduce our panelists. First up, Senator Tina Smith is a fierce advocate for Minnesotans and a champion for a clean energy future in the United States Senate. She's a member of the House Agriculture Committee and the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Help Committee, along with the Banking Committee and the Indian Affairs Committee. Senator Smith wrote the legislative framework for the last Farm Bill's energy title, and in the 116th Congress, she introduced legislation to establish a federal 100% clean energy standard to achieve carbon-free electricity in the power sector. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Smith was Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. She was also the Chief of Staff for the Mayor of Minneapolis and worked for a time in the private sector, including starting her own small business. Senator, welcome back to Policy and Pints. And have you brought a beverage?
Well, thank you, Sam. I'm so glad to be with you and Evergreen again. And I do have a beverage. Now, it is only about a little after 3 in Minneapolis where I am. And so this beverage is a combination of tea and ginger ale. It was a concoction I came up with right before we got on the call. And I will report back at the end of the call whether I think it's a good idea.
Excellent, excellent. Innovations here in our beverages at this Policy and Pints. That's wonderful. Thank you, Senator. Thank you again for being here. Next up, we also have Congressman Ro Khanna, who is another fierce advocate for the climate and for Americans in the House of Representatives. Congressman Khanna represents California's 17th district in the heart of Silicon Valley. He sits on the Agriculture, Armed Services, and Oversight and Government Reforms committees, and on the latter, he chairs the Environment Subcommittee. Khanna is also the Deputy Whip of the House Progressive Caucus. Prior to coming to Congress, Congressman Khanna taught economics and law at several different California universities. He authored a book titled Entrepreneurial Nation, Why Manufacturing is Still Key to America's Future. He worked as a lawyer specializing in intellectual property law and served in the Department of Commerce during the Obama administration. Congressman, welcome to Policy and Pints. Have you got something to drink?
Thank you, Sam. I do. It's about noon here in California, and I've got a masala tea from a place in Fremont, which is much better than the stuff at Starbucks. So looking forward to drinking it. And great to be on with Senator Smith, who's been a true champion for climate in the Congress.
Awesome. Thank you, Congressman. I almost forgot to mention, I have my own drink here. I'm not a guy who's above a 4 p.m. beer, but given the work I told myself I have left to do today, I've got coffee here from La Coupe Coffee Shop in the Petworth neighborhood in northern Washington, D.C. Without that, I want to just say thank you both again for all of your phenomenal leadership on climate in the Congress and for taking the time to dive into this conversation with all of us and everyone who's joined here today. So without further ado, let's jump right into questions. First up for Senator Smith, our country is facing significant challenges. The climate crisis with its clear and present harms upon communities like the wildfires that are devastating the Southwest, but also rising inflation that's driven in large part because of fossil fuel energy costs. And also now global energy security challenges driven by petrostate dictators like Vladimir Putin and his war in Ukraine. At the same time, Congress has a clear opportunity to respond to these crises at once. And can you talk about this opportunity and why it's so important for the Senate, the Congress, and the Biden administration to work together to seize this opportunity and pass a reconciliation bill that contains major climate and clean energy investments?
Well, thank you, Sam. And again, thanks to Evergreen, because all of you have been such powerful voices in Congress and around the country on this issue. And Representative O'Connor, it's so great to be with you on this call too. As I think about this moment that we're in, I think first about how taking action on climate, I mean, we have a moral imperative to do so. We have an economic imperative to do so. This is a justice and fairness issue, and it is a health issue. And I believe that actually the events of the last 4 or 5 months have made that imperative even greater, just for the exact reasons that were implicit in your question. As Americans are dealing with rising energy costs, whether it be home heating and cooling or the price of a gallon of gasoline, the imperative of moving to clean powered cars, electric vehicles, is even more obvious to more people. That is, making that move and supporting that move economically is a core part of what is in the climate package that has passed the House that we need to pass in the Senate. If you are concerned about energy independence, then, and you well should be, as you said in your question, you see these, fossil fuel dictators in Russia and other parts of the country who have the ability to change the price of a barrel of oil, almost overnight because of the global price setting that happens in fossil fuel. I mean, that's another great reason. And if you want to know what's really going on with gasoline prices right now, you might ask yourself why a barrel of oil is going down, the cost of a barrel of oil is going down, but the price of a gallon of gasoline continues to go up, because we are beholden to a highly concentrated and highly profitable fossil fuel sector that is raking in the profits while Americans are paying more and more at the pump. All of that gives, I think, us reason to know what we knew before any of this happened, which is that we have the opportunity here to reimagine a future where we have energy independence, where we have lower cost fuel, where we are on the cutting edge of innovation and technology with clean power, and to address the dramatic need to lower carbon emissions really quickly, lower emissions really quickly. So to me, this is absolutely the moment to be moving forward aggressively and with great urgency. And that's what I do every single day when I go to Congress, to try to make that happen in the Senate.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator. Congressman Khanna, the House, of course, has already passed a package of $555 billion in climate investments last year as part of the Build Back Better Act. This included funding for clean energy tax credits and clean buildings, manufacturing and transportation, environmental justice investments, and investments in ensuring high quality, good paying jobs, and more. Can you talk about those climate investments in that bill and why they're so important, and also what they would mean for everyday Americans?
Well, Sam, thank you again for your voice and for Evergreen's voice, because it was critical in getting what I would argue is the boldest climate package that the United States government has ever done. I mean, this president proposed something that really met the moment, and the House passed it. I mean, look, you've got $320 billion of tax credits, incentives to produce solar, to produce wind, to produce hydro, so that we actually are going to have the renewable energy to hit the goals of 2030 and cutting emissions by 50%, to make sure that we don't reach the 1.5 degrees of rise in temperature. I mean, the president looked at the numbers and proposed something that would meet the targets. And then we have massive investments in the electric vehicle infrastructure. We have $12,000 up to $12,500 for people to get electric vehicles so that they can buy those vehicles. Investments in making sure that we're making the processing the critical materials necessary for the batteries, and that we're investing in batteries like the Gigafactory in Nevada across the country. These are things that would create millions of new jobs, good paying jobs, many of them union jobs. These are things that would make sure that we hit the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change goal and try to keep temperature from not rising beyond 1.5 degrees. And it would mean that it would lower the cost of energy for Americans, because you're going to have the diversification of the energy sources. Finally, it would mean we wouldn't be dependent on Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, or Iran. And it would help our national security to say that we don't need to be dependent on petrostates.
Terrific. Thank you, Congressman Khanna. Senator Smith, next question is back to you. Now the action has shifted to the Senate, and obviously the bill that was passed by the House is no more. But these climate investments are still on the table, and indeed, as you indicate, you and colleagues have not stopped fighting for them. They may, in fact, still be able to receive a path to 50 votes in the U.S. Senate. Can you talk about the path forward for a budget reconciliation bill there, and your optimism, your level of optimism that the Senate can pass a bill containing major climate investments this year?
Sure. Well, as you said, and as Representative Khanna said, the House put together a really extraordinary piece of legislation, a very powerful piece of legislation to address the climate crisis and to spur on the innovation and the technology revolution that we need in this country. And it's completely achievable, too. I think it was not pie in the sky. It was very achievable. So then it comes to the Senate, and as we all know, the overall package just doesn't have 50 votes in the Senate. So let me just deal with that a little bit here. The good news is that I believe that there is broad support for the energy provisions that came out of the House. And let me just acknowledge there was a lot of good give and take between the Senate and the House as those energy provisions were put together. And I am very grateful, especially to the Progressive Caucus, for the partnership that we had as we were working to put this all together. But I think that there is actually pretty broad support for the energy provisions. And I hope also for some of the agriculture and forestry provisions, which also help us to reach our goals for reducing emissions and don't get as much attention, but also have a lot of power. The question is, how do we get to yes on this? How do we get to the place where we actually do have 50 of us coming together? Let me just say for a word, like, why I keep talking about 50 of us, 50 plus one with the vice president. The reality is that there is not bipartisan support in the United States Senate for the kinds of climate action that we require. And that means that the Democrats in the Senate need to use this arcane budget process called the reconciliation process in order to pass it. And in order to do that, we need all 100%, all 50 of the Democrats to get that done. I'm not going to prognosticate here, but I'm going to say that I am aware that there are a lot of very positive conversations going on amongst the 50 of us about what that would look like on climate, but also on the other things that we want to try to accomplish as well. All that package has to come together. And my view of it is that time is not our friend here. The sooner, the better. We need to agree to what we can agree to, recognize that there are going to be some things we think some of us think would be really good ideas that are not going to make it in. And we just need to accept that and get what we can get. I think that is kind of what we're working on right now in the Senate. I'm not going to be more specific about it than that because sometimes less attention paid to all of that, the better. I will just say to everyone listening in that I think I'm very optimistic that we can reach agreement here. And I hope that everyone listening will be thinking about what you all can do to encourage that agreement over what I hope will be literally weeks and not months.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Senator Smith. Congressman Khanna, I would love to turn back to you for the next question. Recently, Senators Joe Manchin and Lisa Murkowski have also put together a series of bipartisan meetings to talk about getting something passed relating to energy policy. And you've been participating in those. Can you tell us a bit about those bipartisan talks and where they stand and how they relate to this?
Well, they've been constructive conversations. I mean, my view is we've got to get things done on climate. I agree with Senator Smith that to get the type of bold $550 billion type of package or anywhere in that ballpark, it's probably going to require reconciliation and 51 votes. I mean, I wish we could get 10 Republicans to support that. I think that's just a high bar. And so the question, though, is how do we get to the 51 votes? And I do believe in my conversations with Senator Manchin for now a while that he really understands the importance and need to invest in new innovation and technology. He wants the United States to lead, not some other country on this. There may have to be some give and take as democracy requires. There's certain things, for example, do we want to make it easier to permit for solar farms and wind farms and transmission lines and battery processing that we can look at? But I'm confident that with the president's leadership, and the Senator Smith and others' leadership, that we can get there. We have to get there. We have to, in my view, climate has to be the central thing that we do, not because the other things aren't important, but because there's literally a time clock on climate. And look, I'm optimistic about the elections, but anyone who's run for anything will tell you every election is unpredictable. And I'm just not willing to risk doing nothing on climate based on the election outcomes in November.
Great. Thank you, Congressman. Well, I've got one more question I want to pose to you both in just a second, but before doing so, I want to again remind the audience we're going to turn to audience Q&A here in a bit. So use the Q&A feature to submit a question if you've got one for the senator or for the congressman or both. I would love to quickly pose a question to you both about what would you say to everyone listening here today, everyone watching this who's gathered around their computers on the Zoom for this great event? How do they raise their voice now and support your work in the Senate and in the House in getting a final climate bill over the finish line this year?
Well, I think that what we need to do is actually exactly what Evergreen Action has been doing, and what we all need to support and lift up, which is this is an organizing moment. This is a moment for people to really come together and make sure that their voices are heard. And I understand that people are, there's a lot going on in our country and on our lives right now, but but this is something that we have to put particular attention to. Being a former grassroots organizer myself, I know the power, and now being an elected official, I know the power of hearing from people every single day about what's important to them. I sometimes have reporters and others ask me, Senator Smith, do you really think in this moment with prices going up and the war in Ukraine and everything that is happening in the world that Americans are really focused on climate as a issue of real salience in their lives? And what I say back to them is what I see in Minnesota every day, where we have extreme weather events buffeting my state every single minute, and people understanding the power of taking action on the climate crisis as an economic opportunity for my state. So what I would say to people who are listening is don't get tired right now of making sure that your voice is heard, because we need that in Congress, and we definitely need that in the Senate, as we are working as hard as we can to put together this final agreement.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, I would echo Senator Smith in terms of what Evergreen has been doing, organizing in a passionate way to prioritize climate, and doing it also in a pragmatic way, an outcome way. I think what we need is organizing that says we've got to get something done. It's got to be bold. But look, no, in a democracy where you have to get 218 House votes and 51 Senate votes, no one is going to get everything they want. That's just the reality of a democracy with a very thin margin. I think the fact that the president has put such a bold plan, despite slim majorities, I mean, these are not FDR or LBJ majorities, is a testament to the fact that the Democratic Party really gets the urgency. But what I'd hate to have happen is that we are apart on a few issues and then we get nothing. And so I think that there has to be a concerted movement saying we've got to get something major on climate done, and encourage all the leadership and those of us in elective office to really work towards an outcome-based goal.
Wonderful. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you both. With that, I would love to take a moderator's prerogative here just for 1 second and invite the audience to go over to evergreenaction.com/call to sign up and urge your senators and congressmen to get a deal done and pass these climate investments this year, indeed, this spring and summer, because the time is wasting. So please take a moment and do that again. Evergreenaction.com/call. I think someone from the team is going to drop it into the chat here too, as we gear up and turn to maybe some audience Q&A. And I'm glad we got some time for the next maybe 20 or so minutes to be able to do a few more questions coming in from the audience. Let me load one or two of those up real quick. First one here. This is a great one. Congressman Khanna, you've been a leader in the House on confronting rising gas prices, and just last week the House passed the Consumer Fuel Price Gouging Prevention Act that you were a leader on. Can you talk that would confront some of the market manipulation that analysts believe is happening there, with, as Senator Smith pointed to, the price of a barrel of oil going down while the price of gasoline continuing to stay high and go higher? Can you talk a bit about that bill and its importance?
Sure. First, I think we have to have the facts. And the facts is that the production has not gone down under President Biden of oil. So what has happened these retailers, when the price of gas is going up, jack up the price. Do you ever notice when the price of oil comes down, the prices don't come down? I mean, you go to the pump, it goes up, 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 but then you go to the pump when you read all the oil's coming down, prices don't come down. So what the bill says is you can't engage in price gouging. You can't say fleece the American public and charge more and make profits if you're one of these retailers more than what is reasonable because people are in a position of vulnerability. In addition to that, I believe we need Senator Whitehouse's windfall profits tax, where you had these oil companies that are making billions of dollars. Everyone else is saying we're doing our patriotic duty. We're standing up to Putin. We're standing for the Ukrainians. We're doing what we can as Americans. And you have big oil, they're making billions of dollars. And they're not putting it in production. This is the big myth. They're giving it to Wall Street. They're not saying, okay, we're going to drill for more oil. They're saying, okay, let's pocket our own, give it to our executives, because Wall Street's telling them don't put it in production. And so what we need to do is tax that if they're going to charge this excessive amount and give it back to the American public. But I think big oil has just been shameless.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Smith, would you care to add to that topic as well?
Well, I think that Representative Khanna is exactly right. I think that as we see prices going up across the board in this country, but especially for oil, and then you look at the structure of the fossil fuel sector, where you've got high degree of concentration, and you've got prices that go up even when the price of a barrel of oil is going down. And these big oil companies are choosing not to activate leases that they have to increase production. So this is exactly why we need to cut ourselves loose from this dependence on fossil fuel. We need to do this in a way that makes sure that we are not exacerbating the price of fuel going up. But that's the genius, I think, of the clean energy tax credits that are included in the climate provisions, because it's basically saying we know that there's going to be some upfront investments on the clean power side to build out that infrastructure. So we're going to support that so that consumers don't have to bear the full price of that early on investment in order to sort of buffer them from prices. Because at the end of the day, the price of wind and solar, whether it's driving your car or heating your house, the delivered price of the price of that kilowatt is zero. You have to, of course, pay to deliver it, but that is going to be good for consumers in the long run, and shifting away from this dependence on oil and gas is going to be absolutely good for consumers too. And I think that people feel that and see that more than they did even a year ago, as we see what happens when we have these global supply disruptions. And who gets rich? The big oil companies. And who pays? American consumers.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you both. Senator, I'd love to actually build on that part. And there's a question here about all your phenomenal leadership on clean electricity. I mentioned the clean electricity standard bill you've introduced. Obviously, last year you worked on the CES and the Clean Electricity Performance Program. Can you talk about some of the investments that are pending in the Congress still on clean electricity, and why it's so important for policy leadership to drive towards a carbon-free grid, both in terms of climate and in terms of cost, as that being a central part of what Congress can take on and make progress on this year?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So we clearly need to concentrate on cleaning up the power sector so that it is 100% net zero emissions as soon as possible. I don't know if you can hear my grandson downstairs, but he must be very upset about what's going on right now. But then what you need to do is simultaneously, you need to electrify everything that you can, whether it is heating and cooling buildings, either your home or big commercial buildings, obviously transportation, by electrifying everything, heating, electrifying appliances and other energy consuming things in your house, then that again is making more of the shift towards clean power. You need to build out transmission lines to make that power delivery reliable using that clean power. And then you also need to realize that every kilowatt of energy that you don't use because you have improved energy efficiency is money that you save and emissions that you don't put into the atmosphere for the good of everybody. And of course, all of this is a huge amount of work, but what does it mean if you do it? It means that ideally you are bringing manufacturing back to the United States. You are making clean, green appliances here at home. That is contributing to the jobs that we want to create here in the United States. It becomes really a virtuous circle that is to the great benefit of everybody. That, to me, is the overall strategy that we're pursuing. And again, I want to just point out that it's the boldness of the provisions that we have in the climate package, that it supports all of that transition in a way that it's just exactly as it should.
Sam, I don't think we can hear you.
Thank you, Congressman. You couldn't. I left myself on mute. Even after a couple of years of this, everyone working on Zoom all the time, we all still do it now and again, I suppose, but I'm a pretty bit regular offender. I want to say, hey, Senator, thank you for that response. And then also to highlight, again, that some of these investments within what's being considered right now in Congress are critical in achieving that goal, like you talked about. I also want to highlight some work that Evergreen's doing to highlight the existing authorities the administration has to drive towards a clean power grid. There's many things pending in the Congress. Some of the most crucial investments, some of those crucial things have to come through the Congress, and hopefully we can get that done this year. At the same time, the Biden administration, led by the EPA, over at FERC, the Department of Energy, can take some really important steps using the existing authorities they have now. And we've got a website called 100cleanpower.com. And if you go over it, you can take a look at the different rules that are pending governing pollution from the power sector, the different market reforms that FERC is contemplating that will help level the playing field so clean energy can proliferate, some of the investments flowing through Department of Energy and other parts of the federal government that can help states further their leadership on a carbon-free grid. So if you go over, take a look at 100cleanpower.com, you can take a look at that campaign we've been working. And Senator Smith, thank you for your leadership. Thank you both for your leadership on that front. I've got another great question here that's come in, a timely one, because of the elections that happened in Australia a few days ago. I've seen obviously Greens and the community independence movement making some gains, and people are attributing that to voters being pissed off about cost of living, but in particular about climate, which has been really hitting Australia hard. We saw the wildfires a couple of years ago, drought conditions, rough climate impacts happening in Australia. Can both of you speak to those outcomes, and if you haven't studied in depth the polity of Australia, perhaps how they relate to the U.S. Or do you think voters around the world are waking up to the realization that climate is here and painful now, and you think it's going to start portending some changes to the ballot box in other countries, maybe even in the United States?
Well, I would just say that I think for younger voters, for voters under 40, this is the number one issue. That when I go talk to folks, they care about it, not just because of the cost of gas, not just because of the current climate events of the wildfires in my state or other horrific events, but because they get that they are going to have to grow up and raise families and have kids and grandkids in a situation where if we don't deal with climate, it's going to be catastrophic. And so for them, there is such moral clarity that we have to act on this and such energy and such activism that I have no doubt that by the time that their generation is in charge, we will have bold action. My problem is how much are we going to mess it up before they get there? Because we can make things very, very, very hard if we're not acting. And so we have got to really listen. Look, I think young people in this country, whether it's been civil rights, whether it's been the movement against Vietnam, whether it's been gay marriage, they are often a indicator of where the country should be going. And we've got to listen to the young people right now on climate.
I really appreciate that, Ro. I think you're absolutely right. And I would add that if you think about what happened in Australia, an area roughly the size of Minnesota burned and the Australian wildfires. And Minnesota is a very big state. For those of you who haven't been here, it takes nearly 12 hours to drive from the southern border with Iowa all the way up to the Canadian border. So the reality of how these extreme weather events caused by the climate crisis are affecting us here in Minnesota is very, very clear. What I would just add to what Rose said is that it is really incumbent on candidates, whether you're running for the first time or whether you're running for re-election, to not be afraid to bring these issues up on the campaign trail, to talk about it, to make the link between strong climate action and lowering energy prices and creating jobs and economic opportunity here in the United States. I think too often in the past, the discussion around climate was a discussion that was sort of, doom and gloom, and whatever we're going to do is going to end up costing more money in the long run. And that is actually not at all the case. This should be a story of opportunity, of seizing the high ground, of seizing leadership and moving forward, and that candidates really need to not be afraid of that message. They need to embrace it and to carry it forward. And I can tell you here in Minnesota, when I carry that message, I don't care whether it is in North Minneapolis, where the people who live in that community, disproportionately Black and Brown and Hmong, have borne the price of fossil fuel pollution much more than other parts of my state. I don't care whether it's that message is I'm delivering it in North Minneapolis or in the most rural parts of my state, where people understand that energy independence means that there's going to be more jobs and more opportunity in southwestern Minnesota, where we have such powerful sources of wind power. They get that, and they're waiting to hear politicians articulate this message in a way that connects with them and their lives, and it is a huge opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you both for the very thoughtful responses to that particular question, and the clarion call that we're hearing now from people, young people in particular, but Americans throughout the country, about the need to stand up and respond to this moment. With that, we're coming up on sufficient time here, and really, again, appreciate you both taking the time. Senator Smith coming back to the Policy in Pints program, Congressman Khanna coming on and taking the time to talk through this afternoon these really important topics with me and with the audience. I would love to give you both a couple of minutes just to end in closing about the really critical, important nature of Congress rising to the moment this year and getting these climate investments over the finish line, in case you get any final comments before we let our friends go. Either of you happy to start?
Ro, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you again, Sam, for your leadership. Thank you to everyone on this call. I mean, it is no exaggeration to say your activism, your involvement is what is inspiring the White House, Congress to deal with this with the boldness. And thank you, Senator Smith. I mean, she was on so many calls with the Progressive Caucus, pushing and advocating for as bold an agenda as we could get on climate that could pass, and I really appreciate her leadership. I would just say this, look, I think this is a moment where we can make the case so clearly for a moonshot on renewable energy. You have a clear case where we see the consequence of petrostates. I mean, the reason that Putin is being taken as seriously as he is, they have no innovation economy. They just have oil. And that's what propelled Saudi Arabia with their brutality in Yemen. It's what propels Maduro in Venezuela. It propels Iran. If we want to be free of these petrostates, if we want to have independence, the way to do it is to have a moonshot in renewable energy. And if we want to be free of this price volatility, where one day it's $6 at the pump, the other day it's $3, but then it's back up to $6. I mean, who wants to live with that every few years going through volatility? Well, the way to do that is investing in renewable energy. I completely agree with Senator Smith that I think that people are open to the message, but we can't be weak about it. People respond to a clear conviction of strength. And we have to say, this is the way forward for jobs. This is the way forward for American consumers. This is the way forward for national security. We have a winning message. We're going to stand for it. And I think if we do, we won't just get it done. We'll actually win the political argument because it's fundamentally true.
Thank you. I completely agree. And we should just agree to get together every once in a while, Ro, so that we could remind ourselves that we are on a path to not only not only the right path, but I truly believe a victorious path, a path that is going to lead to getting this done. If you don't believe it's possible, it's never going to happen. And I really believe that this is possible. And I believe that in this moment, we in this country, we can lead or we can follow. And if we lead, we are going to be on the forefront of lower energy prices, more energy independence, and the technology transformation that is going to make our economy more fair and more just and healthier. And that is something worth fighting for. I'm thankful to Evergreen Action and to everybody who is on this call for joining in and for being a part of it. And just want to say thank you. And I would also like to report that the ginger ale iced tea concoction is pretty good, and I would recommend it. You can give it a try. It's almost like Arnie Palmer, except with ginger ale. So give it a try. And thanks so much, Sam, for bringing us together. It's fun to talk with everyone.
Totally. Thank you. It's good to hear the concoction. That drink is great. I will give that a try, Senator, and I will report back to you as to whether or not I concur with your perspective. With that, I would love just to raise a glass quickly. Let's do a cheers. Have everyone on the Zoom who's watching this as well want to raise your glass in the air to a healthier and more just and sustainable economy, to a more secure America, to getting these climate investments passed in Congress and moving on to the next battle. Cheers, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.
Sure.
Thanks for coming to Policy and Pints. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Congressman. We'll see you again. See you all.
Thank you.